Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Dr. Patrick Singer live from Greatness TV, and have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Samuel Nweze, who's just published a book with the Greatness University publishers titled Worshipping Disorders. So we will be talking about this book. We'll be talking about his mind behind writing this book, his reason, and the different disorders that people experience when they go to worship. So you might be asking, who is Dr. Samuel Nweze? So Dr. Samuel Nweze is a founder and pastor of the International Congregation of the Uniting Church in Sweden. He is an experienced and passionate intercontinental worship leader. He's a teacher and a counselor. He has a very unique gift, which is music and singing and worshiping, gospel music. And his albums like Nothing Impossible, if you get time, search his name, and you can listen to some of his quality music. So, and he as well has a very, very popular show during which gives us gospel songs there now. So again, you can link up with him and you'll be able to have a chance to experience how he uses music to preach or to spread the word of God. So Dr. Samuel Nweze, welcome to Greatness TV. How are you?
I'm good, Dr. Businge. Thank you. Good to be with you and on your show today.
Oh, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure, as I always say, it's always a pleasure when we meet great people like you as an author of greatness. And this time we're focusing on one of your books, Worshipping Disorders. So a very unique and mind-boggling topic or title. How did you come to this title of this book?
Thank you. That's a very, very good question and a good place to start.
Thank you.
It's kind of a long story. I've not always thought about writing on such a topic, but two things inspired this topic. Number one, as a worship leader, long-time worship leader, every time I observe how the business of God is done everywhere I go. I'm very passionate. When you say that you are passionate about something, it means you notice what others ignore.
Mm-hmm.
So this I have done for a long time because it's important to me that this only thing that God demands from us that we can give to him, that we get it right. That's number one. Number two, when I was at seminary at North Park Seminary in Chicago, we were asked to choose a topic for our thesis, and already inspired by this, I chose Worshipping Disorders. It just came. I didn't think about it, just came. So I wrote on that, and my professor then liked it, and I remember him saying something. He said, I think you should think about writing. You know, some of those words that drop out of people's mouths that eventually grow into something big. So ever since then, I began to, it never departed from me. It was years, more than 10 years, but eventually I began to think about putting my thoughts to paper. And that's how this book came about.
That's very powerful because I have heard some people, when they saw this title, they're asking, worshipping disorders. There can't be disorders in worship. What do you mean? How could you publish that kind of book, Worshipping Disorders? Worship is always orderly and there's no problem and it's beautiful. And so could you tell us, just give us a snapshot of what these disorders are? Just an outline.
Oh yeah. I mean, this book is kind of divided into two parts, but let me just go straight to your question.
Yes.
Which is what many people who are going to read this book may just move to the section that details some of the disorders.
Yes.
Okay, so the disorders I'm discussing here are discussed in this book. They are kind of little things that most people don't think about, but they happen anyway. Because what happens is that when it comes to worship, there are countless number of theologians and authors that have written. I think worship, the subject of worship, is one of the most written about. But a lot of those I noticed are just general things, theologizing, nothing really practical. I mean, those are very good, excellent treatises, but I decided to go into an area that I was passionate about, practical things that happen when we worship God. And these things happen and we don't think about them, but they are like little foxes that spoil the vine of our worship. For example, in that section, I talked about the issue of lateness.
Yes.
I think most people, especially from the from the developing countries, especially Africa, let me limit it to Africa, but it's not exclusive to Africa, would understand this section, because it is something that even if it happens somewhere else, it shouldn't happen in church. That we don't care what time we come to church. And I see church as a holy appointment with God.
Wow.
And I live in the West. I live in Sweden. And I know that in Sweden, time is time. You cannot be late when you have an appointment anywhere. Otherwise, you pay a heavy price. And I've been late to things before, like late to the airport, and I lost my ticket. You know, so people, if you are late when the train is moving, you have to wait until the next train. But when it comes to church, people struggle into church as if it's not important, as if they are just coming there to meet their friends. But we don't go to church to meet our friends primarily, but we come to church with our friends to meet God.
Yes.
So I gave the issue of lateness a prominent place in this book because it's something very endemic that people need to change from. Let us know. I want worshipers to know that it matters to God what time we come to his presence. It does matter. Even if it doesn't matter when you get to your place of work, it matters when you come to church. If you come late to church, it affects so many things. I mean, I'm not sure we'll have enough time to detail the kind of things I said there. It affects
not, but definitely what you're saying is really, really very important, because growing up, I remember one of the priests in the church I went to was saying, look, you've made an appointment with God. God wants you to be there at that moment in time.
Right.
If you are late, if you think you're going to be late, you'd rather not come, because it creates a lot of, first of all, you miss the first message, or the primal messages in the appointment.
Yeah.
You're swinging in the middle of the service or the appointment. You don't know what happened. And then, well, it's not about you coming in late. It's about the other people you're distracting by coming in late.
By coming in late.
Because you're coming in late, other people are ready to listening to God or deep prayer, and really having that spiritual experience.
And we're going to disturb them when we're trying to get to where we're going to sit.
Yes.
It gets serious when even worship leaders themselves show up late and the church has to wait for you. That's just how bad it can get, you know.
And that's why you're saying here, actually, Bishop Ransom Stephen is saying here, this worshiping disorders is an expressive masterpiece, and it calls to reverential discipline during worship, corporate worship. It's not individual worship, it's public, it's communal. So it's really, when you're coming in late into the worship or into the service, you're
Right.
disrupting others, and that cannot be right in the eyes of the believers themselves in that church or wherever they're gathered, but the same in the eyes of God. So thanks so much for highlighting that important disorder in worship. So which other one did you touch in your book, Worshipping Disorders? Which is the other disorder you'd like to share with our audience?
Of course, I know most readers are going to confront this one, and most viewers this evening would expect me to highlight this one, the problem of mobile phones, mobile devices in church. And this one was inspired by an experience I had at seminary. We were in our beautiful chapel worshiping. It was a very solemn moment. And I think I opened this chapter with that story, with that illustration. And then suddenly, out of somebody's pocket, the phone began to ring. And these phones, they have music that have nothing to do with anything spiritual. It can be music that just brings immediate, dissonance to what is going on. So the atmosphere was immediately spoiled right away. And I said, no, whenever I write, this is going to be there. And everyone knows how disturbing these small gadgets can be in church. And it's been so difficult for users of mobile phones to discipline themselves and just say, for the next 2 hours, for the next 1.5 hours, nobody is worth my attention except the one that I have come to worship. We are not ready to make any sacrifice so that God can be worshipped properly. And I cited the incidents at the Garden of Eden when Jesus went with some of the Peter and the rest to the garden, and he went further inside to pray. And then when he had that encounter with his father, and then he came back, he found them sleeping, and he was exasperated. He said, "What is he?" He screamed. He said, "Can you not watch with me for an hour?" My question, the main point of this chapter is, why is it difficult for us to just dedicate 1 hour in a week, 1.5 hours, 2 hours to God and say, nobody is worth my attention until this service is over? I don't know why we can't do this. At the same time, we talk about giving God sacrifice of praise. Not many people know that praising God, worshiping Him is a huge sacrifice. You must give something. You must sacrifice something. So if we can quieten our phones, then people will be allowed to worship, peacefully, to worship undisturbed. There will be tranquility in the church and no ringtones. And the worst thing is these phones. I grew up in a time when everybody understood the ringtones of telephones. But now, just about anything can be turned into ringtone.
Yes.
And these things go off at will when we worship and disturb everything and everybody. So this is the cardinal thing that I said here, that we must tame our phones. Many churches struggle with this. Some churches even installed jammers, big churches that can afford to do that. But how many churches can do that?
Not many.
So the responsibility is on us to discipline ourselves and tell this phone, you are mine, I am not yours. And then it's an honor to God. And
thanks so much for saying that, because what you're highlighting here is that you have in a way, an addiction. There's an addiction to mobile gadgets or handheld gadgets, whether it's phones or iPads and Kindles and so on. And those create a disorder in church, in worship.
Right.
But one of the things I know is, and I've seen, observed, is that some of those at the moment, for example, there are some of these children in church when they come to church, so that the parents were, instead of taking care of them or trying to help them understand with the worship. They give them a mobile phone to distract them or distract them
Yeah.
from what's happening. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not supposed to be. We can't rob Peter to pay Paul. We can't sacrifice service dedicated to God for the comfort of our children. There are many ways parents can take care of their children other than to equip them with an instrument that will be detrimental to worship by other people. This thing is all about civility also. You know, when we do certain things to people, they don't like it. Why should we do those things to other people? It's all about civility. So even if you don't want to think about God, think about the person sitting next to you. That person, you see, church is one place where the troubled souls come to find refuge. It's one place where people come to be silent before God and empty their hearts to God undisturbed. It's a sanctuary. Now, when they come there and discover that even in church, what they are running away from outside, they also meet in church. That's not fair. That's not fair. So, yeah.
Oh, thanks so much for highlighting that in your book titled Worshipping Disorders. Ladies and gentlemen, in case you've just joined us, my name is Dr. Patrick Singh from Greatness University, and I have the pleasure of introducing and interviewing the author of the amazing book titled Worshipping Disorders, and you can see the book or the book cover on our screen, and it says they are calling out irreverent and uncivil attitudes in Christian worship. So Dr. Nweze, in one of these uncivil acts or attitudes in worship, he talks about the dressing for church. Could you tell us what you wrote in that chapter on how people dress or should not dress for church? Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is a very sensitive one now,
Yes.
but I decided to go into that, and I try to be as fair and balanced as possible. I am not by any stretch of imagination implying that Christians have uniform dress code. No, we don't. I don't. So it's not about uniform. It's not about dress code, but it's about thinking, was God concerned about dressing, about what we wear, about the cloth on our skin? Of course he was. He was. And time will not permit me to go into some of the examples that I gave, like Adam and Eve, when they did what they did and ran away and hid from God. For the first time, they discovered that they were naked. But God cared, and God did something to cover their nakedness. Eventually, God even went beyond the animal skin, the leaves that they used to cover their nakedness. So God cares. And even throughout the Bible, raiments were issues with the Levites, with in Israel. The priests did not just wear anything. What they wore, was recommended even up to colors, details, minutest details of the raiments that they wore. And also, I think that when people just stroll into church without preparation, because it also shows that you consciously prepared yourself to go to church. when we appear before a decent God, we must look reasonably decent. That's what people expect, because when we go to work, we don't dress anyhow.
No.
When we, in my former job in my native country of Nigeria, I remember I was on a duty one day, and then they sent someone from the government house to look for me to come and take over somebody's duty that had been, sent away. And that duty required that I will be working with the state governor at that time. Now, even if I was wearing jeans, I was never going to continue to wear jeans, because when you work with such people, you have to dress reasonably well.
Yes.
To detail. So within a week, I had to sew about 5 completely new clothes that will show that I'm working with a VIP, like a state governor. So it just goes to show dignity. It goes to show that God cares about beauty. The Bible says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. I don't want to walk into church looking, dressed in a way that negates what the Bible says concerning me. Beauty begets beauty. So that's what this is about. It's not about uniform. It's not. And then also, we have to care how the message that our dressing sends out. The first measure of a person's worth in many places is the person's appearance. So when we ignore that aspect, then we open the church to indecent dressing even. And then you find people sitting and dressed in ways that offend other people. Like so many pastors can tell stories of especially girls sitting in the front seat, not well dressed and exposed in ways that are indecent, and people that are up there struggle. Everybody is human, so nobody standing there on the altar is yet a spirit, as much as we can pretend. So it goes to show that we think about what we will wear, that we have to dress reasonably well in a way that we show that we are going to worship the God who cares about our beauty and our decency, and also that in a way that will not offend the people that we are worshiping with. So these are very, very important things that people rarely think about them. So those are the kind of things. There are so many other things in that section that probably time will not permit us to go to. I also touched on the issue, the importance of dressing the worship environment.
Yes.
Decency. Everybody, if you come to my home and find everywhere upside down, you won't like it, and I wouldn't like to expose myself as an unkempt fellow. So why should we not do the same in church? We can do the same in church if we can keep our house in order. God's house is more important than our house, by my own estimation. Jesus said that much. When he saw people doing all kinds of things, even merchandising in his Father's house, he cared. He cared, even if they did so in their houses. Jesus said, no, you can't do this here, because my Father's house shall be called a house of prayer. So it's about caring about our Father's house.
Yes.
It's about caring. We have an investment here. I can't have a beautiful house and leave God's house looking anyhow at all.
That's why we have volunteers coming in to dress the church or clean the church.
Right.
Make sure that when people come in, or worshippers or the congregation, they find the place clean, and then it enhances the prayer. It enhances this. It should be the church should be a different environment as compared to our homes, isn't it? So
Right.
if you think about the Jewish origins of the church, looking at the temple, even the temple, they have those most important places where no one would enter anyhow. The Holy of Holies, for example. Only the chief priest would access the Holy of Holies only once in a year.
Only once in a
That's
year.
the holiest space in the, because that's where God is. So there is that. Thanks so much for making sure that as well dressing not just as ourselves, but at the same time dressing the environment in which prayer takes place. And you also talked about the beer parlor attitudes. So what does this mean? Um, could you give us an insight on what are these beer parlor attitudes to in worship, and why is it a disorder?
Of course, I'll be glad to. I think that just the title I gave this um, tells someone what I may have written here immediately, because everybody knows what happens at beer parlors. It's a place of over relaxation. It's a place where, you know, people just come in and everything that is formal is thrown to the winds, and everything that will just give them as much pleasure and fun as possible takes a place there. When we fail to distinguish between the house of God, the house of worship, and what potentially takes place at beer parlors, then we begin to navigate towards worshiping disorder. People obviously come to beer parlor um, without any without uh, any need to observe normal decorum. They can relax anyhow. They can even lie down on couches. They can take any posture that they want. That's what beer parlors are meant for. But in church, if we come to church with such an attitude, we begin to disrespect God. There is no prescribed position for worship in a way, except that we know that we have this call to, David said in Psalm, I think Psalm 105, come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord, our God, our maker, for he is our God. So he is our God. That's why we should do like that. When we walk into church, hands in pockets, crossed legs, even during prayer, chewing gum, you know, and cat talking with other people, those are the kind of things that can take place under informal circumstances. But in church, common sense tells us that, you see, in my culture, the posture you take when you stand before an elder is the first line, the first sign of respect or disrespect. Yeah, in the theoretical part, I discussed that we didn't go to that part. So I can't talk to my father with hands in pocket. It's just immediately going to communicate disrespect. And in a lot of the cultures, you have to actually prostrate before an elder.
Oh, yes.
To stand straight. In school, I mean, when I was in school, you can't stand and talk to your teacher anyhow. You have to stand straight and talk to your teacher. No hands in pocket. When we when we come into church, because there's no coercion not to do all those, the tendency is for us to just assume any position, any posture, including when you're approaching communion table. There's no, I think gone are the days when people clasped their hands as they approached the altar to receive the communion. These days, hands in pocket, some even play on their phone when they are coming. You know, so those are the kind of issues I talked about. Of course, there are theoretical concepts here, like put some quotation. The good thing about this book is that I gave references so that people can actually see that a lot of what I have written here, a few people have thought about before and seen that these are danger signs for Christian worship, and we must avoid them completely if we can.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nweze, for writing this amazing book, Worshipping Disorders, one of its kind, that really goes through the different disorders that people might experience, possibly unknowingly, when they are in places of worship. And Dr. Nweze in this book has talked about postures, he's talked about the problem of lateness. He has talked about how people abuse and use mobile phones during prayer, then dressing for church, and at the same time dressing the environment in which people pray. And finally, we talked as well about the beer parlor attitude. So this is an amazing book that you need to get if you haven't gotten it yet. And it's widely available on Amazon, Global, Amazon, wherever you are. We should be able to experience what is really talking about. So we are going to switch gears to now that we know what these disorders are. What next? What next? We know the disorders. What next? So I'm going to use some of these words. I don't know whether they're appropriate. Possibly this might be your next book. So how can we heal these disorders? And if you can't heal them, how can we manage some of the disorders? Do you have anything in mind or would like to share with our viewers? We know the disorder. So what next? Yes, Dr. Nweze.
Yeah, actually, what I did in this book, in these practical disorder sections, I actually proposed certain steps, certain solutions, certain steps that people can take in order to avoid these disorders. Like in the case of lateness, I gave, I think, about 5 things that people can do. Think about just start early to prepare. You don't give God residual time. Realize that he wants you, he needs you. I don't subscribe primarily to to the saying that God stands in front of the gate and distributes gifts to people that are early, and then he will vanish, and those that come late don't get their gifts. I mean, it's not in the Bible, but there have been things that people said, all aimed at making people to wake up and come to church early. And people can do that. Just let's be truthful to ourselves. Let's know that worship is about God. It's a holy calling. It's an appointment. If we see it as an appointment, then we'll make every effort to come to. Most people that come late to church, it's not that they can't come early. They can. It's just to decide to. When it comes to mobile phones, if you can't silence it, even when you fly, one of the things they tell you is put it on flight mode or turn it off completely. When you go to military installations, hospitals, courthouses, if we can tame our phones at such places, why not in church? Just be conscious. Realize it's not about human beings, ushers controlling you. It's about your decision to worship God as a person in a reverential way and to show civility to other worshipers. Yeah, somebody just wrote, you can put it in church mode. I like that.
Yes.
Put it in church mode. It's God we are worshiping. And then when it comes to the other things I talked about, know that if you can give respect to anybody, the people we call VIPs, significant people in society, if we can be careful about how we appear before them, realize that God, G-O-D, he's not D-O-G. Treat him like God, your Father, who made so much sacrifice on our behalf by giving us his Son. What can we not offer, to him? So it boils down to realizing who we worship and the need to take him seriously. We must take God seriously and his worship seriously. What else can we give him? And we must take our fellow worshippers seriously. That is civility in church. You know, people suffer when we don't behave well at church. It's not just about us. Let's not be selfish. We make life difficult for other worshippers. Parents, take care of your children. Don't pacify them with things that can disturb other people. There are crying rooms in our church, for example. We have a crying room. Take them there. The parents don't like to miss any segment of the service, so they would rather just put something in their mouth or in their hand and say, you know. So let's change some of these attitudes for the greater glory of God and for the well-being of fellow worshippers as well.
It's powerful. Thanks so much for those handy tips. Very practical and possible for those who want to change their lives and make a difference to the worshiping environment. As Sir Rivers said in his endorsement, that this book and Dr. Nweze demystifies the heart of true worship by showing us the world, the hindrances to a pure heart of worship. What hinders people to have that pure heart to God? But also, I always use the analogy of an internet connection. You know, you're always looking for the good signal, a strong signal to God. So these worshiping disorders, they kind of reduce the signal. They reduce the internet connection to God. So the more we minimize them, and the better we have the connection with God. So I think that's a key message that you're giving us in this amazing book. And that, for example, one of the pastors, I'd imagine, Joe Itborn, who says that if you want to take the heavenly rest very seriously, then this is a book to read. Why? Because he's read it himself. He's realized the kind of things that might be potholes in our rest to heaven. So if you do want to take that rest, then this is as well a very important topic that Dr. Nweze has brought up for us to be able to follow through and attain what we are looking for and be with God. Thanks so much. So, Dr. Nweze, how can our viewers get in touch with you?
Yes, this book is already on Amazon, amazon.com. I think we'll work very hard to make sure that it also goes to other places, outlets where people can easily get them. So just put my name there on Amazon or put worshiping disorders, and it's going to come up. And I recommend that everyone support the ministry that we have here by purchasing this book, and I'm sure you will enjoy it. Also, my Facebook page, I can be contacted for speaking appointments on this book. Of course, I'll be willing to show up anywhere where people want me to speak concerning this book. My desire is simply that attitudes change and that we can worship God properly. That's what this whole thing is about. So we must expose those things that the enemy does in the church that people don't think about. And they send wrong signals to God that we are not serious at all about our worship, the only thing that he demands from us, and that we don't take one another seriously when we come to his house. I will be glad to come and expound this book in details. What we have done today, what I've done today, because of time factor, is simply to just brush through it. There's a lot more to this book. We didn't touch the first section at all. So, yeah. So yes. I want to thank you, Professor Businge. Thank you so much.
And thanks so much for being with us this morning or evening or afternoon, whichever continent or part of the world you are. And it's been Dr. Patrick Singer from Greatness University and Dr. Samuel Nweze, um, the author of Worshipping Addictions. And in case you missed the show, it was Reb launching this amazing book, Worshipping Disorders, and congratulating him on this amazing journey that he's taken to write this amazing book for each one of us. Thanks so much. And in case you're looking for a copy, you can get it on Amazon. And as well, reach out to Dr. Nweze himself through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and definitely LinkedIn, and you'll be able to address your concerns and ask or answer questions that you may have in relationship to this amazing book. Thanks so much and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, and God bless you.